Harris campaign really believes that there are enough disenchanted Republicans that could make the difference in this election, especially in those key swing states, that so-called blue wall that is so critical for Harris to pick up. And you heard Liz Cheney yesterday make an urgent plea to some of these Republicans that they can vote however they want in the ballot box, but they don't have to tell their friends about it. And that is what the Harris campaign is banking on, that there are so many Republicans exhausted in their view by Donald Trump that they may be able to switch, at least for this election.
Kamala Harris and Republican Liz Cheney held town halls in Michigan and Wisconsin yesterday in an attempt to essentially convince disillusioned Never Trump Republicans to cast their ballots for the vice president over Trump. Now, some hawkishness unfortunately ensued because, let's keep it real, that's who Liz Cheney is. She is a neocon. And the real question is, while Harris is trying to build this coalition of Democratic voters, traditional Democratic voters, and neoconservatives, does that mean that should she get elected, it will translate to neocon policies within her White House? Now, during the town hall in Wisconsin, Cheney tried to specifically ease the nerves of Republican voters who do believe in the neoconservative philosophy. Let's hear what she had to tell them.
I also know, because I have spent time with Vice President Harris, because I have come to understand what she believes about how she will govern, that she will be a president for all Americans, that she's committed to listening and committed to having viewpoints, some of which, come from different ends of the political spectrum. And if you think about how you conduct, your life outside of politics, how we all conduct our everyday lives, those are the kinds of people that you trust. Those are the kinds of people you can work with.
The strength of our democracy requires a strong two-party system. It really does. It requires that we have healthy debate, based in logic and fact, and that we debate it out, have good, vigorous debates, have a good fight over policy.
So, the message there is you might have your reservations about casting a ballot for a Democratic candidate, especially since the neoconservative ideology differs so considerably from what traditionally Democrats have believed in. But don't worry, Kamala Harris is open-minded to our ideas and our influence. That's at least the messaging that I got out of that answer, but I'm curious what your interpretation was, Cenk.
So look, I get the logic of both sides. And so I read an interesting piece with David Plouffe, who's on Kamala's team now. And so they're, of course, trying to get those undecided voters. And yes, they still exist, believe it or not. And yes, now some senior citizens, older voters above 65, are just gradually going towards Kamala Harris a little bit more, and some non-college educated white voters, which is Trump's base, are going towards Kamala a little bit. So trying to reach out and saying she's bipartisan, you can trust her, she's normal, she's going to bring us back to sanity. I get the logic of that, right? At the same time, saying I'm open to every idea, including the Cheney's ideas about foreign policy, not a good idea, okay? And that's not what the voters are looking for. The voters are very anti-war, right wing, left wing, it doesn't matter. And the polling indicates that. Dick Cheney was enormously unpopular at 13% in the last poll taken of him, 13%. I mean, wrapping your arms around a guy at 13% and his family and his way of thinking before an election, I mean, they might look back at that and go, wow, that is the most questionable thing anybody's ever done. Why would you go towards the least popular person in politics? Somebody made a great analogy today. They're like, it would be like Bill Clinton, because it's about the same time frame, as he was running, going, you know what? I love Richard Nixon. And I'm thinking of putting Nixon's allies in my cabinet because I'm bipartisan and I'm in search of good ideas. What good ideas did Nixon have? And by the way, he actually started some liberal parts of the government because he was forced to because back then we had enormous power and strength.
Like the EPA, if I'm not mistaken.
EPA, OSHA, et cetera. So actually that's a worse example than Dick Cheney, because I can't think of a single good idea that Dick Cheney's ever had. So what are we gonna debate with them? Should we invade Iraq or Iran? Is that a debate? Or Syria? Who are we going to invade? I've never seen Dick Cheney have any good ideas, and neither has the American public. So I can see both sides of it, but being this aggressively pro-Cheney is almost definitely the wrong way to go, because guys, it's not just Liz Cheney or no one. You could use Adam Kinzinger. You could use other Republicans that have turned, right? Bring them in.
I have a different proposal, although the proposal wouldn't really work out for Kamala Harris in regard to fundraising. I mean, she did bring in a $6 million haul from J Street, for instance. But remember, the two states that I was referring to earlier, the two states in which these women just had these two town halls were Wisconsin, you're watching clips from that, but also the state of Michigan. And so I think it's telling that Kamala Harris's campaign is far more willing to make a deal with the devil to maybe increase her share of voters in the swing state of Michigan, when we already know a pretty simple way in which Kamala Harris could increase her support in the state of Michigan. And what would that pretty easy way be, Cenk?
So if she just said, I'm in favor of weapons embargo if they don't do a ceasefire immediately.
Israel.
In Israel, you would pick up 5 points in Michigan. And right now she needs it because she's losing in, look, everybody's got different polls and everybody loves to look at the polls that they believe in, okay? But you look at the real clear politics average of polls, not just the average of polls, but the last 7 polls. She's tied in 1 and is losing in the other 6. So the most recent polls. Now, even if you found one where you thought, oh my gosh, she's tied or she's leading, the momentum is clearly going towards Trump and she's losing Michigan now. And in that interview with David Plouffe, he acknowledged that Michigan is tough, that the blue wall states are tough, and that it's going to be a razor-thin election. Now, it doesn't have to be a razor-thin election, especially in Michigan. If she calls for a weapons embargo or cutting the funding of Israel, she'll definitely win Michigan, and then she'll probably definitely win the election. But isn't that amazing? And doesn't that tell you everything you need to know about American politics? That she would rather lose the election than defy any of her donors.
Well, she's really under the assumption that she could win the election by moving forward with the strategy that we're talking about here. The strategy of aligning herself with neocons in order to increase her support. But remember, Liz Cheney was ousted from Congress by voters in her district, right?
I find less relevant though.
No, but like neocons aren't even popular among Republican voters.
No, you're absolutely right about that. But she lost because she was against Trump, and Wyoming is Trump obsessed, and so the dear leader.
I understand that.
Yeah, the dear leader told them to eliminate her, so they did. Okay, so look, I respect Liz Cheney for blowing up her career to do the right thing.
Yes, I give her credit for that.
Yeah.
That doesn't then mean that I would go out of my way to campaign alongside her with this delusional idea that I'm going to pick up a bunch of Republican votes.
Yeah, and that's the thing that's maybe even more important, which is that they don't understand the voters, including the Republican voters and the undecided voters. They think, oh, if I go more towards traditional Republicans by being neocon and loving corporate CEOs and stuff, I'm gonna get Republican votes. But you're on the old political spectrum of right and left when you should be on the political spectrum of populist or establishment, right? So when you're going more towards the establishment, you're not necessarily picking up right-wing votes. Like they're not interested in Jeb Bush. I mean, there's like 7 Republicans left in the country who like the Bushes and the Cheneys.
All low energy.
Yeah, and so like, they think no, and this is part of their delusion that is so important, because they still think that as soon as Trump is gone, no, the Republican Party is going to go right back to Mitch McConnell and Bob Dole and Mitt Romney and stuff, and because that's how Republican voters actually think, and we're in some period that's an aberration, and that once Trump leaves, the fever will break. No, the party has changed completely. Now, Trump is pro-war and he's a giant liar, but his base is actually anti-war.
His base is, that's correct, yeah.
And well, I almost said when, because right now he is winning, but if he wins, and then he goes and starts a giant war in the Middle East, which he almost certainly will do, his base is, parts of his base, of course, a huge part of his base is gonna be like, yes, sir, we always wanted war, sir. What else do you want, dear leader? How can we get you more money, right? Et cetera. But a significant, and they're gonna be shocked by this, a significant chunk of his base is gonna go, We said no war. What part of that was confusing?
In fact, I mean, look, we have fairly recent history to reflect on, right? I mean, I remember when Trump was about to do a strike in Iran and start a war with Iran in his first term. The actual America First crowd within his base were furious about it. And so that is real, right? Like that contingent within his base does exist. So we'll see how this all plays out. But the messaging from Kamala Harris herself in the context of this town hall was also fascinating. She reflected on her time as a United States Senator, and here's what she had to say about her favorite part of serving in that role.
When I was in the Senate for those 4 years that I was there, my favorite committee was the Senate Intelligence Committee, and I'm going to tell you why. We would walk into that meeting in a skiff, which is a secure room. We'd have to leave our cell phones outside. The press, with all due respect, were not allowed in, no cameras. People would walk in, Democrats and Republicans, take off their suit jacket, roll up their sleeves, and we dispense with who was a Republican and who was a Democrat.
We're all funded by the same donors and weapons manufacturers and private contractors. I loved the Senate Intelligence Committee meetings. Anyway, maybe I'm being unfair, but really, that was your favorite part? That was your favorite part of being a senator?
So guys, that goes to the same exact thing we were just talking about. Because if you live in a world where you think the fever is going to break and it's Republicans and Democrats, I'm going to get more Republicans if I tell them I'm bipartisan and in favor of the intelligence community that has launched so many disastrous wars and has taken all of our money and thrown it in the garbage or to the defense contractors, et cetera. Well, yeah, if you were in the 1990s, that would work. I know it's stunning, but that's because people only watch television. And in television, they told you, bipartisan is amazing. Bipartisan is the greatest thing in the world. When they agree to invade Iraq, it's awesome. When they agree to do corporate tax cuts, it's awesome, right? So, but if you live in the real world today, saying that you love the Intelligence Committee is going more towards the establishment, not towards the populist, undecided, independent / right-wing voters that you want to capture. So you just literally don't understand who the voting base is. And so it's guys stuck in politics that are decades old.
Yeah, exactly.
And they can't snap out of it. They can't see clearly. So no matter how much they see, they go, no, we're gonna get those Bob Dole voters. Bob Dole's not around, brother. You're in a different planet.
One more clip from their Wisconsin town hall, and then I want to turn to the pressure campaign to reward Liz Cheney. Okay, but first, final clip from this town hall.
The world is watching this election, and our allies are worried. Because the reality is that when we as the United States of America walk in these rooms around the world, we walk in chin up, shoulders back, with the earned and self-appointed authority to talk about the importance of democracy and rule of law. And being a role model, this is a room of role models, we know as a role model, people watch what you do to see if it matches up to what you say. One of my very real fears, Charlie, to be candid, is I hope that we as the American people fully understand how important America is to the world.
She said that with a straight face. Like I think she really believes what she just said. You want to talk about the rule of law? Does that include international law? Does that include international law?
No, of course not, no.
As the United States is aiding and abetting and providing cover for all sorts of war crimes that are currently being committed by our ally Israel.
Yes, again, they're stuck in the 1990s. They think we'll just lie and no one will catch us. We'll pretend we're for the rule of law and we'll let Israel break every law there is, commit every war crime that is, and we'll fund it, and no one will notice because we'll have Chris Matthews, who you're gonna see, he's back in a second, and Morning Joe and all those guys lie and tell everybody that Israel's a moral army that isn't breaking any laws. So, but the internet exists. The entire Democratic leadership class is frozen in amber in the 1990s, and they still think like, oh, we'll just get Morning Joe and The View to tell our propaganda and we'll win this election. No, people aren't interested. Look here, guys, another giant point. So these are super rough numbers, but it doesn't matter what the numbers are because the scale is right? So a lot of people make this point online. There's about 4 million Republicans that you could potentially maybe get if you're the Kamala Harris campaign, but there's 26 million progressives, okay?
I know, but who cares about them?
But those progressives are not sure whether they're going to vote for you or they're going to vote third party or they're going to stay home because they're so bothered by your policy on Gaza and they're bothered by the fact that the Democrats barely ever deliver. Did it ever occur to anyone on Kamala Harris' team, and this is a legitimate question, and I think the answer is no. Did it ever occur to any of them that you might want to pick up progressive votes? Isn't that amazing that it seems like it's never even occurred to them? Do you see Bernie Sanders being pushed out? Do you see a town hall that Kamala Harris is doing with Bernie Sanders or someone along those lines? And talking about healthcare and talking about higher wages.
Healthcare is not even on anyone's radar in this election. Okay, the opportunity to actually use the very temporary influence and power progressives had in this country was squandered. It was, and we're gonna talk about that later on the show. It was squandered, and now there is no discussion about improving our healthcare system. There is no discussion about any of the economic populist ideas that progressives purported to care about, but didn't fight for, okay? They fought for other things that ended up leading to a lot of backlash among the electorate. And that's why we are here today talking about the Democratic Party moving toward the neocons. And I'm pissed about that.
Yeah.
But I'm the right winger, right? I'm the right winger. I'm the right winger because I don't like the neocons, because I don't like the wars, because I want economic policies, not this garbage.
So look, I get why.
I'm the right winger.
On that front, if you don't know what Anna's referring to, so I get that people who are looking at it at a surface level and didn't watch Anna's interview with Jillian Michaels or any other things that she said on this show and other places, they might go, oh, she's really disgruntled with the Democratic Party.
I am.
Okay, and hence, in my binary mind, I think that means she's a right winger. Right?
I'm not.
Okay, but what I can't understand is that people who did watch the interview and people who do hear you on the Young Turks going, oh, she really upset at Democrats for being pro-neocon, pro-corporate CEOs. She wants them to be more populist, care about universal health care, higher wages, getting out of Gaza. That's why she's a right winger. But wait, do facts matter anymore?
No,
Does policy
they don't.
matter anymore?
They don't.
Does reality matter anymore?
Because the aesthetics of progressivism is far more important than actual progressivism. Actual policies that lift people up, that actually help marginalized people across the board. Universal economic policies that do lead to increased wages and things like that. That stuff doesn't matter. That stuff doesn't matter because we have fragmented activist groups who have their little pet project that they shove down everyone's throat. And if you don't agree 100%, well, then you must be a right winger. I'm done with this dumb politics, okay? This is dumb, totally dumb.
So now that brings us to Chris Matthews, because Chris Matthews is gonna tell you who the new Democratic Party is. And then you tell me if the new Democratic Party is to the left of us or to the right of us.
Yeah, tell me how this tastes, progressives. Take a look.
I wouldn't think a few years ago I would ever be singing the praises of a Cheney member of the family, a member of that family. I really did not like the Iraq War, and I didn't like the neocons, and Cheney was leading them all, and he took us into that war, and it killed almost 200,000 people in Iraq, and it served no purpose. Those two women, as you say, on that stage is remarkable because there's such courage there from Liz Cheney, and I cannot say anything that would stop me from saying she's been unbelievable. I also want to say something about the Democrats. If you're going to use her, repay her when you get in office. Don't just act like you're giving a little nod to a Republican. Clean up some of your act. You've got problems, Democrats. You don't have all the answers. You got to do much stuff for action on the border. You have to get serious about it.
Okay, so Chris Matthews, and I'll tell you what role he's played in mainstream media if you're too young to remember. because it's an amazing role, and he just played it again there. I like that they brought back like a legend of the television screen, news actor extraordinaire to give this speech. So he's like, now remember, Democrats, be more Republican and make sure that you're not just using the Cheneys as window dressing. Give them real power.
Yeah, a
so
cabinet.
we can go back to starting more wars.
A cabinet position.
But remember, Chris Matthews was against the Iraq War and against the Cheneys. Was he? Because I was around. We've been around 22 years, longest running show in internet history. And we covered Chris Matthews when he was massively for the Iraq War. Later, like Trump, he lied about it. Okay, I got the quotes to prove it to you. I know because I put them in my book, TORT.com/justice, to get Justice is Coming. Here's some of the quotes. May 1st, 2003. You remember when Bush landed on the aircraft carrier with the giant mission accomplished banner? In fact, that was the one thing that Bush said was a mistake, because he preemptively declared that we had accomplished the mission and that Iraq War was over and we had won and they had thrown roses at our feet, right? And then, oops, it turns out we hadn't won and it was a disaster. This is what Chris Matthews said on that night when he gave the worst speech of his presidency, George W. Bush, and was humiliated, so much so that he admitted it later. Matthews said about Bush, he won the war. He was an effective commander. Everybody recognizes that, I believe, except a few critics, okay? And then he said that this landing on the aircraft carrier, pretending to be a pilot, when he hid the entire Vietnam War not being a pilot, he said this was, quote, an amazing display of leadership. He didn't actually go into the war. He did a photo op, you schmuck. But wait, it gets worse. Last one. We're proud of our president. Americans love having a guy as president, a guy who has a little swagger, who's physical, who's not a complicated guy. They want a guy who's president. Women like a guy who's president. Check it out. The women like this war. I think we like having a hero as our president. It's simple. He just told you that he was against the Iraq War. And he this morning on Morning Joe.
Yeah, and he also demanded that the Democratic Party, should Kamala Harris win, provide a cabinet position for Liz Cheney for her incredible leadership. Now, Liz Cheney did the right thing once in her career by fighting back against what Donald Trump intended to do in overturning the 2020 presidential election. For that, she deserves credit. She blew up her whole political career in order to do the right thing. She deserves credit for that. Her policies have been and always will be dog crap. And I don't want that to be absorbed into the Democratic Party. Okay, you should want to support a party that actually represents your values.
Yeah, so guys, last thing on this.
It's just like, what's the point of supporting a party that doesn't represent your values unless all you care about is the name brand?
That's what it is, 100%. So, and yeah, of course, I'm voting against Trump, and I'm gonna vote for Kamala Harris because I'm voting against Trump because Trump's a lunatic. And Republicans, try nominating a non-lunatic, you might win in a landslide. Anyways, so I told you, what's the role of Chris Matthews in American media? His job is to be the pretend Democrat that pushes the Democrats to the right. So that's why he worked for Tip O'Neill, and who was a legendary Democrat back in the 1970s, and they would always use that in their marketing. Chris Matthews, lifelong Democrat who worked for Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill, even he agrees Dick Cheney's absolutely right about everything. George Bush is an American hero who won the Iraq War and saved all of our lives. Even Chris Matthews agrees. So they brought him back to do that. Why? Because Joe Scarborough, who is also a Republican, Nicole Wallace is a Republican, Michael Steele is a Republican, Nicole Wallace is a Republican, almost the entire MSNBC lineup are Republicans. And they've taken over the Democratic Party, and here they are, two Republicans pretending to be Democrats, telling you we gotta bring back the Bushes and the Cheneys so that the Democratic Party could be more grown up. And if you don't remember, Chris Matthews also said, when they all panicked that Bernie might win in 2020, he did a segment where he said if Bernie Sanders wins, we might get executed in Central Park because he's such a communist. Okay, so that's who these guys are. And if you think they're to the left of us or the old Democratic Party or Bernie Sanders, you just don't understand anything. Okay, you literally don't understand politics at all. No, they've gone massively right wing. And it is not populist, it is pro-establishment, it is corporate media and corporate politicians saying, this party's ours. We want the Democratic Party and we're in control of the Democratic Party. So it's a fair criticism to say, then Cenk, why are you even voting for that? Because the other guy says, hey, if I don't like my vice president, he should be murdered and we should terminate the Constitution. So please, someone nominate a non-lunatic, non-warmonger, non-corporate pleaser. But America, because bribery is legal, that is near impossible.